welcome back to Voidheart Studios, and today I am finally making good on my promise to do mod showcases. Yeah, it took me a while to actually start doing this, and I honestly don't really have an excuse. But, yeah, finally doing it now, with probably my most intensive project so far, the Boomer Nova. This is a modified, I guess it would be considered a mini-gration of a Sledgefire, with some parts from other blasters. And, yeah, let's get on with it. I'm not going to do a traditional overview because this isn't a review, this is a mod showcase. So, the base blaster in this modification is a Sledgefire, and it is still mostly stock. In terms of internal modifications, I removed the air restrictors and I improved the seal with craft foam, as well as taking out the slide lock so you can deprime the blaster, since I removed the air restrictors. The point of this mod was primarily aesthetic, because with the simultaneous release of the Hammershot and the Sledgefire being the first blasters in Zombie Strike, they were still kind of getting the hang of their aesthetic they were going for in the new themed series. And so, when they finally did get the hang of it, you were left with some pretty weird outliers in the first two blasters. And I wanted to change that for the Sledgefire, because the Sledgefire is probably one of my favorite Zombie Strike blasters. And so, yeah, the purpose of this mod was to make it match the eventual modern Zombie Strike aesthetic. And I did this by essentially making a Frankenstein creation of a bunch of other blasters. And yeah, this thing still functions. I'm feeding it with these 3D printed shells, which I believe I have found the files for, and I will post the links to the files in the description. And I'm running these 3D printed shells because, let's face it, Sledgefire shells are increasingly harder to find in the Big 26. And so yeah, it still fires. And with these shells, I can even shoot half-darks through it. So, yeah. Okay. I don't want to lose my shell. Okay. Nothing. So yeah. In terms of the cosmetic modifications, it was painted. I used, I think it's apple basket, apple bloom, apple bucket. I don't know. It's the cheap acrylic paint you can get from Walmart, which I know is not a good idea for painting blasters, but it worked for this because I'm just painting select parts of the outside cosmetic shell of the blaster. The very first thing cosmetically I did to this blaster is I removed the stock. The stock always felt like the most intrusive part of the blaster to me, and with the 3D printed shells not actually retaining in the shell carriers, it didn't really feel like a necessary part to me, and plus I can kind of use this as a hand cannon, so that's nice. The next thing I did to it, I'm trying to remember the order because I made this mod last July. The next thing I did to it was I added the stock top tactical rail from my Venom Pro. Since I used a body kit on my Venom Pro, I still had the stock Picatinny rail lying around, and so I threw it on the top backwards. Because on the Venom, this little raised piece is in the rear, and I put it on in the front. And then I attached the front handguard. Now the front handguard is the slide from a Recon Mark II. And that part of the mod was actually kind of sad to use. I mean, I had already gutted the blaster to use for my Ritalicon that ended up not working out for me. But at least a piece of it still lives on here, because that Recon Mark II was my first ever blaster. I got it back in 2016 when the Recon Mark II released. But yeah, this is the front handguard from my Recon Mark II. And then I think the next piece I added was this piece, which is the cut up jam door from the Recon Mark II. And then I added this front sight here, which is a catch spring from, I believe, a Busby Wizard. Whatever the 4-shot fake Smart AR pistol is from Busby. And then I attached the guts from my old Fire Strike. That being this light assembly, which doesn't function. I might see about shoving a small cheap flashlight in there, but I have no concern with it right now. It's just kind of there for the looks. And then I have the wires just kind of running into the rail, and I glued them in. Then I attached this, which is the light switch for the Fire Strike. It's the secondary, like, rev style trigger, but I mounted it trigger face down, so the little prongs up here will stick up, kind of like a flintlock hammer in a way. And then I added this piece, which is half of the bolt sled from a Recon. When I made this, I was also working on my Retalicon, so I took the bolt sled, the Recon bolt sled, out, since I used the Recon Mark II bolt sled in the Retalicon build. I took the Recon bolt sled and snapped it in half and cut off the end piece, and then I used it as a cosmetic piece for this build. And then down at the bottom, I had thought about getting somebody in my group to make me a 3D printed sling loop for the Sledgefire. But then I had an idea to make it myself, because again it would match the cobbled together junk blaster aesthetic that Zombie Strike is known for. So it's a Recon catch that I'm using as a hook point for a sling. I'm thinking about getting a personal sling for this blaster, like to use on this blaster and this blaster only. But I'm thinking, I don't know what type of sling I would do, if I would do just like another airsoft sling like the ones I use for my gear, or I thought about getting the shoulder strap from a purse or something, like asking my mom if she's got a purse with a shoulder strap that she doesn't use anymore, and just throwing the shoulder strap on here to even more fit with the aesthetic of Zombie Strike. And yeah, I painted in, I did some of the details. I painted in these little vent holes here on both sides. I painted it on both sides. Hasbro, I painted it on both sides. Sorry, I have to take every moment that I can to beef with Hasbro for not fully painting their blasters. I did detail work on the Recon Mark II slide, and I did some more kind of detail works of my own. I did little, if you notice the little flecks here, they're supposed to be like scuff marks, scratch marks, so like, since this is such a close combat weapon, with it being essentially the Nerf blaster version of like a high caliber shotgun or a blunderbuss, not really a blunderbuss, just like a high caliber shotgun, it sees a lot of close range combat, and so you think the scratches if like a zombie got a hold of your barrel, or bumping it into stuff. And then kind of weathering and stuff on it. I don't know. It's my first good mod, and the paint only looks bad because I'm not good at painting, but to be honest, it being poorly painted fits with the aesthetic more. I mean, I'm not using it as an excuse or a cop-out. I do kind of want to get better at painting these things, but I mean, if you really think about it, doing aesthetic work like that in a zombie apocalypse when you're already rushing to cobble together blasters out of whatever junk you come across, you're not going to put a lot of effort into making the paint super refined and perfect and proper. So yeah, I painted the little vent parts here. I painted them silver with all the metallic paint on here, by the way, is all Gundam markers. I have a case of Gundam markers that I used to use to custom paint Bakugan, and now I am using them to custom paint Nerf blasters. And of course, I have the tally marks here painted in a metallic green, and I have my signature down here. Just because, why not? Figure it's my project, it's my art project, I'm going to put my signature on there. It's... yeah. And so, what could I talk about more? The name. I haven't talked about the name. So, if you're anything like me, which if you were, then you would be highly interested in this hobby on a very clearly neurodivergent scale, but if you're anything like me past that, you like lore. And I like lore. So, I looked at the lore, and looking into what people have dug around in terms of like the blasters in their prototyping phase, the Sledgefire was going to be an elite blaster, and it was going to be called the Boomer Nova. And so, and then it got repurposed for Zombie Strike, and then it got called the Sledgefire, because I guess that sounds more zombie than Boomer Nova. I don't know. Boomer Nova sounds like something some teenager would name their high caliber shotgun in a zombie apocalypse. But yeah, I called it Boomer Nova. I got it on both sides of the recon slide. And I mean, yeah, that's really about it. This blaster probably won't serve me much use outside of plinking. I mean, I live in Texas, so that makes me categorically the state that's furthest away from any good HVZ. So it probably won't see any actual use in HVZ. So the Zombie Strike blaster, sadly, will not be striking any zombies in the near future. But it's definitely fun to plink with, and my group does casual indoor meetups sometimes when the weather isn't good or in the really hot summers, so I figure with the CQC nature of the airsoft field we go to... damn it. I want to be able to flick prime this thing so badly, like how you can do it on the Corsair, but whatever. You would need to have a lighter spring in here, which would make the performance worse, and it's already getting barely better than stock, so yeah. Performance wasn't the main focus of this mod anyways, it was completely aesthetics. But yeah, now that I have rambled on for probably far too long about this personal project of mine that I love very, very much, I will treat you to seeing it fire out on the range. And that'll end this video, so I'll do my outro outside. But anyways, yeah, go watch it fire. Alright, we're here on the range with the Boomer Nova, my modded Sledgefire. and I'm going to do the firing showcase. I'm going to start off with full-length darts. I've got 4 shells loaded with Dart Zone Nitro Shot darts, and I've got 4 shells loaded with X-Shot Air Pocket darts, and I'm just going to be pulling them randomly out of my pocket. There they go. Alright, now I'm going to load up all these shells with half darts. All my shells are now loaded up with half darts, and these are going to be completely random because they're just completely random half darts within the shells. I decided not to do any sort of particular brand cohesiveness because if I'm using this at an HVZ or I'm using this at a meetup, I'm going to be using random bin darts anyways. So, why not? And again, 8 shells, 24 darts. Let's go. And the final shot. Nice. All right. Well, that concludes the firing showcase for the Boomer Nova. I have noticed that just in general, half-length darts get worse performance than full-length darts, which you think it would be the opposite way around, but I wonder if it's something to do with it being shell-fed, not having like a compression barrel, because I know half-length darts are meant for compression barrels and springers, so who knows. But yeah, aside from that, that'll be the conclusion of this video. If you did enjoy, then please do leave a like and subscribe. Comment your favorite part of this mod, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye!